Well, Yusuf, basically all eyes this afternoon will be looking to the judge Bernard Eboso of the Environment Court, who is expected to make a ruling on that particular petition that was filed by those two importers. And that ruling is expected this afternoon at 2:30 here at the Milimani Law Courts. And his ruling will basically determine whether on Monday plastic bags will be banned or whether Kenyans will have more time to use them and seek alternative means of packaging, because this particular petition filed by those two importers are, of course, arguing that, first of all, they were not given enough time to clear their stocks and be able to get rid of the plastic bags that they have within their grasp and within their businesses at the moment, and also on the fact that they were not consulted, and it is upon that basis in which they are banking most of their argument in this particular case on that the Ministry of Environment and indeed the government did not conduct stakeholder consultation before coming up with that Gazette notice on the 27th of February this year. But the government is also defending itself in this particular case. This case has been filed against the Ministry of Environment and the Attorney General. Now, the defense side argues that, first of all, these two traders and the importers, rather, filed the case very, very late. Now, this Gazette notice was made public on the 27th of February this particular year, but the petition against the ban was only filed on 13th of July, just last month, nearly 5 months after the Gazette notice. And it is that argument that the Ministry of Environment is using in this particular case, that it was a case that was filed very, very late, and that the petitioners have not really submitted enough evidence to show that there will be economic implications if that plastic bag is banned from the streets of Kenya. Now, the ministry is also arguing that it is within its jurisdiction and its obligation to ensure that the country has a very well economic, rather social economic environment aspect, and that the environment within the particular country has been sustained to the level required by international organization groups. Now, in their submission, they had argued that they cited a case in Masai Mara in Narok County last year, that out of the number of cattle that had died, 40% of those who had the cattle that had died, 40% of them were found to have ingested plastic in one way or another, and that plastic may have contributed to the deaths of the cattle, and that is in last year's statistics. Now, the government and the ministry is using that statistic to argue out its case in this particular petition, and this afternoon, Bernard Eboso will decide whether to side with the two petitioners, Frederick Jenga and Stephen Mwangi, in this particular case, or they will go and side with the government, in which effect then that means that on Monday, the importation, use and manufacture of plastic bags will indeed have been banned in Kenya. This will be the third time such a directive is trying to be effected, and perhaps it might be third time lucky for the Ministry of Environment if indeed the Environment Court this afternoon rules in its favor. Yusuf.
Timothy, it's very interesting that the ministry issued the Gazette notice in February this year, and the businessmen are saying that they didn't have enough time, or they were not given enough time by the officials from the Ministry of Environment. So what time do we expect to get a final ruling from the court?
Well, the final ruling will be this afternoon at 2:30. Bernard Eboso is the judge expected to make that particular ruling, and it's a high-stakes ruling, if I might add, because if the judge indeed decides to suspend the ban on the plastic bags, then it means it's back to the drawing board for the Ministry of Environment, and the ruling also, he might not only suspend, he could either suspend or just get rid of the ban completely. completely. He may rule either way. So if he decides to rule to suspend the ban, then it means the manufacturers, importers and sellers of plastic bags may be added more time to prepare themselves, perhaps get rid of their stocks, clear all their contractual obligations, as they have argued in this particular case, pay off those who supply them, and really get that enough time to really transition from a society that has known plastics for the longest time to a plastic-free society. If the judge decides to kill the ban completely, then it means it's back to the drawing board for the Ministry of Environment in trying to seek alternative methods of safeguarding the ecosystem. Remember, the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, who, by the way, have been enjoined in this particular case, have been arguing that simply banning of plastic bags may not solve the crisis of environmental degradation and environmental sustainability, that there are other ways in which the environment can be conserved without having this cost implication on the economy and on those people who will lose their jobs if these factories and manufacturing plants are indeed closed. So perhaps for the Ministry of Environment, if the court does not rule in its favor, it may mean that it may have to employ other means, perhaps employ the use of anti-plastic bags campaign, or invest more in solid waste management systems that the Kenya Association of Manufacturers have been arguing that that is the best way to go, and a ban is not what this country needs at the time. So can plastic bags simply be wished away? That is what the court may be deciding this afternoon. 2:30 p.m. is the time, Yusuf.
Timothy, before I release you, one final question. I'm sure you've been following this story for a while now. What happens, to those who have a stock of this plastic bag? We just have 2 days before the ban takes effect on Monday. So what are they supposed to do with the stocks they have?
That's the same question that the petitioners in this particular case, representing importers and sellers of the plastic bags, have been asking the courts. If you ban, what do we do with our stock? Now, they argue that they have contractual obligations, and some of them have made half payments for the importation of the plastic bags that they have imported, and will pay the other half once those that they have in stock have been sold to the public. Now, if you ban it, it means then there might be a dilemma in terms of payment of contractors, especially of those plastic bags that have been imported. Now, that is the question that the manufacturers hope will be asked. But if you ask me, if indeed Judge Bernard Eboso decides to rule in the side of the Ministry of Environment, then you can argue that the manufacturers, or rather the sellers and the importers of the plastic bags, will indeed undergo tremendous loss. And aside from that, they may have to close up their manufacturing plants, like I had highlighted over this particular week. Many manufacturing plants are in the risk of closing down. In fact, one already closed down yesterday. Many more expected to shut down on Monday. Now, a lot is at stake. It's not only about the manufacturing of plastic bags and the sale of it. There are livelihoods that are at stake. There are people who work in this factory. According to the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, nearly 60,000 direct jobs are expected to be affected. Now, these are not only 60,000, but it's 60,000 plus, because most of the individuals who work in this factory are breadwinners. They have families who depend on them. Now, that is what perhaps this ruling will try to determine. But to answer your question, it may be a case of bad debt written off for the importers and sellers of these plastic bags, if indeed the court does not decide to rule in their favor this afternoon, Yusuf.
Clearly, a lot is at stake there, even as we await for that final ruling. Many thanks, Timothy, for that comprehensive update. That was a reporter, Timothy Otieno, coming to us all the way from the High Court, where we do expect the court to offer a final ruling with regards to the plastic bags ban. We're going to link up with Timothy once the courts make that final ruling. And still with that story, with a ban on plastic bags expected to take effect on 28th of August, that is Monday, Meru County National Environmental Management Agency NEMA director says they're ready and that they have been sensitizing members of the public on the issue. John Wafula says his office has created awareness on the issue through roadshows and that the residents of Meru have been informed on the alternatives available. Wafula said his office will be working together with County Enforcement Department to ensure that the ban on plastic bags is enforced.